With Forza Horizon on the way and boasting evocative footage of cars blasting around amazing open roads, I got to thinking about the lost art of the road trip video game. There used to be tons of them knocking around, swapping circuits for point-to-point chases through traffic and capturing the freedom of the highway in digital form. The most recent stab at the concept was the atrocious Need for Speed The Run, which somehow managed to condense the potential tedium of a 3,000-mile journey into a mere 2 hours of actual driving. A particular highlight is the 3 identically barren plains levels right in the middle of the route. Battlefield 3's deeply sexy Frostbite 2 technology has never been so badly misused, and the only redeeming feature is the existence of canned heat on the road again on the soundtrack. Wind the clock back though, and the world was full of brilliant games about chasing that horizon. Arguably the one that kicked the whole thing off was Outrun back in 1986. Well, unless you count the Oregon Trail, and I don't, because my idealistic road trip doesn't involve shitting myself to death. Outrun was extremely advanced for the time, running on... Hold on a minute, this isn't right. That's better. Right. Outrun ran on Sega's revolutionary Superscale engine, which allowed 2D sprites to be moved and resized at ludicrous speeds without the machine having to redraw them. And while it wasn't the first game to have that scrolling pseudo 3D effect roadway, it shook things up by allowing you to choose which route to take at the end of every stage. It also had an achingly cool open-tops Ferrari Testarossa that I'm pretty sure Ferrari knew nothing about until the game hit arcades. Especially because there was only ever one officially built by the car maker. There were several home versions of Outrun, including a Master System version that could be played in stereoscopic 3D, but none of them were truly arcade perfect until the Sega Saturn version 10 years later. A further 7 years later, a full sequel appeared in arcades, complete with an official Ferrari license, remixed soundtrack and a bigger focus on tyre-boiling power slides. Oh, and if there is a woman on Earth who responds this positively to reckless driving, I've yet to meet and propose to her.
Drift more! Let's start! Yes! Woohoo! Oh yeah!
I'm sure the whole Ferrari plus the open road thing did nothing to inspire Cruis'n USA, Midway's arcade racer from back when the N64 was still called the Ultra 64.
Coming to your home in 1995, only on Nintendo Ultra 64.
Though famously, when Nintendo's console finally arrived, it wasn't actually powerful enough for anything more than an ugly, clunky conversion. Highlights of the fully spec'd arcade version included blasting through a forest full of giant redwood and a bizarre ending sequence where Bill Clinton is in what's commonly referred to as a redneck hot tub on top of the White House. Perhaps stick to the racing games, guys, and leave the political satire to Jon Stewart?
Y'all come back!
It's not just cars that do the open road well, there are several road trip games that focus on 2 wheels too. Take your pick of the Road Rash series, for example, though I'd recommend the surprisingly pretty 32-bit reboot. Cyclemania was an obscure PC title that used actual footage of roadway and then populated it with sprites, speeding the video up as you accelerated. You'll never have heard of it before because no one has ever heard of it before. In keeping with the theme of self-indulgence, I'm also going to include Super Cycle by Epyx on the Atari ST, simply because it's one of the first games I ever owned, as part of the Discovery Extra Pack that came with my ST. This kid knows what's up. Well, not enough to actually place his hands on the keyboard. Talking of the Atari ST, British viewers of a certain age who owned an ST or an Amiga will fondly remember the second of the Lotus Turbo Challenge series. It swapped the circuits of the first game for a series of consecutive point-to-point routes. While racing games are a natural fit for road trips, they don't have a monopoly. Sam & Max Hit the Road was all about the bizarre slices of Americana you find along the way on a US road trip, such as gator-themed golf and the world's largest ball of twine, complete with a rotating restaurant and the world's sweariest Uri Geller tribute act.
To help me fix the rotating mechanism on this diner.
Well, that makes sense.
It's all yours.
Thanks.
Similarly, while Grand Theft Auto San Andreas isn't a racing game, the fact that Rockstar managed to crowbar what was essentially the state of California plus a bit of Nevada into last-gen technology means there's plenty of space for surprisingly substantial road trips. In particular, the route between Los Santos and San Fierro is inspired by the legendary Pacific Coast Highway, one of the most famous road trip routes in the world. And you can listen to Poison by Belle Biv DeVoe while you drive it. Few games before or since have surpassed the scale of San Andreas, but Fuel on the Xbox 360 was built on technology designed for a vast open world. The result is a post-apocalyptic play space that stretches for 5,560 square miles, which is apparently roughly the size of Connecticut and translates into hours of highways, mountain passes and dirt trails. Plenty of asphalt to pound then, it's just a shame all of the vehicles handled like hovercrafts. Even Test Drive Unlimited's smaller open world was large enough for an extended drive, and its contribution to the genre was the ability to meet with friends over Xbox Live and go for no-pressure cruises around the Hawaiian island of Oahu. Even with a storming time, the tour of the island race would take you around 40 minutes of hard driving to complete. Much of the mythology surrounding road trips comes from the road movies made in the 1970s, like Vanishing Point and Two Lane Blacktop. So when Interstate 76 arrived on PC back in 1997, complete with desert highways stretching off to the horizon and a complement of luridly coloured muscle cars, it hit the tone perfectly. Oh, and if you're wondering if games really looked this awful back in 1997, bear in mind that the cutscenes were purposefully designed to look rudimentary. You know, like Fair's clever modern art and Donald Trump's toupee. Probably. Road trips might be entwined with fiction, but there have been occasional games based on real-life events. Gumball 3000 is an annual rally where the obscenely rich pay 25 grand to break speed limits, behave like idiots, and occasionally turn outrageously expensive cars into metal confetti. The game based on the rally that ran in the year 2000 took you on a route through Europe, and as is the tradition for the road trip genre, did a really good line in Ferraris that are legally distinct from Ferraris.
3, 2, bam, go, go!
Far more classy is Mille Miglia, part of a brief trend for isometric arcade races and based on a 1,000-mile tour of Italy that has its roots in a road race. Since the 70s it's been run as a classic car rally for vehicles built before 1957, and the game has a generous handful of them complete with some truly excellent engine noises. Amusingly, a version was made for the American market that had more explosions, fire and flashing lights. One of the most famous road trip games was never actually available to buy in stores. Desert Bus is part of an unreleased Penn & Teller Mega CD game called Smoke and Mirrors, and is a real-time simulation of the bus trip between Tucson, Arizona and Las Vegas, Nevada. It's a journey along an entirely straight, featureless road for 8 hours, and if you think that means you can just blue tack the accelerator button down and head to the pub, Penn has news for you.
Don't let go of the controller and watch that little pull to the right. It's not glamorous, not pretty, not exciting. It's real.
In spite of its obscurity and willful attempts to be irritating, Desert Bus is extremely well loved, mainly because of its connection with charity work. Desert Bus for Hope, an annual sponsored playthrough of the game, has raised over $800,000 since it launched in 2007. In November 2011, an iOS and Android port of the game was released, with all proceeds going to the Child's Play charity.
Desert Bus.
While I opened this feature moaning about Need for Speed The Run, the irony is my favourite road trip is from the first game in the very same series. The Need for Speed, as it was then called, featured three-part point-to-point races against a single competitor, one picking its way through a dense city, one following the contours of a coastline, and my personal favourite, one that winds its way through alpine terrain which gets snowier as you climb in altitude. And yes, of course, it has a Ferrari with a missing Ferrari badge.